Rover, seldom sober. I'm a rover of high degree. It's when I'm drinking. Good day to you, friends. Seamus here. So terribly sorry that it's been so long since our last visit. Hopefully, we'll be able to see each other more often in the next little while. I'm going to share with you today one of the first stories that I ever shared publicly. I learned it many, many years ago, or I first heard it many, many years ago, and I've learned it in a lot of different versions over the years, and it's a fox story. And the joy of a fox story is, although I learned it as a Scottish fairy tale, fox stories are known across the world. There's all the grenade. There's all the great renard stories in France. There's many fox stories from Russia and Northern Europe. Here on this side of the ocean, there's wonderful old indigenous stories about the fox, wonderful stories, and you should maybe look some of them up. But today, we're going to share a tale called The Fox and the Goose. It's a story that I learned when I was entertaining children many years ago, and I still love sharing it today. It is a fairy tale, and like every good fairy tale, it begins once upon a time, so very long ago, friends, that I can't rightly remember. But on the southern slopes of the great Highland line, there lived a fox. And as our story begins, Mr. Fox is very hungry. In fact, he always is. And in this case, he's even more hungry because it is just the first few days of spring after a long, hard winter. Now, Mr. Fox would normally eat just about anything. He would dig for roots and eat grubs and worms and bugs and leaves. It would make never mind to him. But having just come out of his winter earthen burrow, he's very hungry. And what he really wants is meat. Sadly, all of the little things that would normally fill his belly, they haven't come out for spring yet. He can't find a single mouse or a vole or a little squirrel, nothing like that. And he's getting quite hungry. And day by day, he comes lower and lower down out of the hills towards the floor of the valley, the glen, if you will. Until one morning, he wakes up with the first rays of the sun, stretches out his paws, has a big yawn, and opening his eyes, he realizes he's not more than a hop, skip, and a jump away from the edge of a farm. Now, farms scare him because farms mean people. And the only thing that Mr. Fox fears more than wolves is people. He's very cautious. And he lays down in the gorse underneath a big pine tree, and he watches the farm as the sun rises and the activities begin. And he sees Mr. Farmer go out to the barn, and he can hear the sound of horses being cared for. He thinks he can hear the milk hitting the bucket. And he watches as Mrs. Farmer, the farm wife, comes out of her house and heads towards something that he's never seen before. Oh, he's seen hen houses and chicken coops and barns and stables. But this is a large, kind of a wattle fence, like a woven wooden fence, about 4 or 5 feet high. It's got a roof on it, and it's just in the middle of a vacant corner of the field. And as he watches, the farm wife comes out with a big basket, and he can tell by the smell that it's full of a little bit of everything. Leftover vegetables, leftover oatmeal, whatever might be to hand. And he listens as she gets closer, and he realizes what he's hearing coming through the wattle is the sound of happy, honking geese, big old honking geese. And they're excited because the farm wife is coming and she's bringing their breakfast. Well, Mr. Fox watches and watches and watches some more. And sure enough, as she gets to the gate of the fence, the geese are all gathered around waiting for their breakfast. And the farm wife yells, "Shoo, shoo, back up, you sillies." And most of the goose, they do back up. But there's one silly goose hanging out right by the gate. And the farm wife stamps her foot and says, "Get back, you silly goose, or I won't come in to feed you." And the goose honks and flaps and honks and flaps. And finally, the farm wife knows that this goose isn't going anywhere. She knows that this goose doesn't like to be in the pen. She wants to get out. So very carefully, the farm wife opens the gate and she squeezes through and she kind of pushes the goose away with one foot while she closes the gate behind her. And she throws out the meal of the kitchen scraps and the leftover oats and the grain and bits and pieces from the kitchen and feeds the goose. And they're all honking happily and flapping around the feeding trough and having a grand old time. But as she turns to leave and goes back towards the gate, sure enough, that one silly goose honks and flaps and breaks away from the pack and tries to follow the farm wife out the gate. And the farm wife is fighting her and pushing her back and shooing at her, and nothing seems to work. And finally, the farm wife has had enough. And she says, "You silly goose, you daft numpty. If you want to get out that badly, go right ahead." And she throws the gate open, and that goose goes flapping and honking her way out of the pen out into the farmyard. The farm wife steps up, slams the gate shut, and carries off back to the house. Now in the tree line, laying down in the gorse, there's Mr. Fox, and he sees this one lone goose now out and about with her freedom. And Mr. Fox is saying, I know what to do with a silly goose. I'll put that goose in my belly is what I'm going to do. And he slinks out of the gorse and he goes from tree to tree and from the watering trough to the corner of the barn to around the stables until finally he gets a beat on that goose where he's directly behind her. She can't see him. And he sneaks up as quietly as he can and brum, jumps on the goose. And he clutches her neck in his big, strong jaws. Ah, I got you now, Goosey, and I'm going to make you my breakfast. Well, Miss Goosey, as you can imagine, she squawks out, oh, please, Mr. Fox. Oh, please, don't eat me. Mr. Fox says, no, I'm hungry, and you're silly. You escaped. I'm going to eat you. Oh, please, Mr. Fox, oh, please, don't eat me. And this goes on for a few minutes until Mr. Fox realizes, wait a minute, I'm having a discussion with my breakfast. I'm playing with my food. It's time to eat. And just as he starts to come down a little stronger on her neck, Miss Goosey calls out, oh, please, Mr. Fox, please, may I ask a favor? Well, Mr. Fox has never been asked a favor by his food before, and he is intrigued. So he said, what is it, Miss Goosey? And she says, I was raised up by a good church-going Goosey, and I was taught to always give thanks for my food before I ate. And oh, Mr. Fox, I would go to my untimely demise much more comfortably if you would just give thanks for what you are about to receive. Well, Mr. Fox didn't know what to do. He shook his head, which of course shook Miss Goosey back and forth, and he thought for a minute, and he says, I don't know how to do that. And she says, oh, I'll say it first, and then you can say it after me. Mr. Fox thought that was fair. After all, he was going to get the fullest belly he's had in a year. And he said to Miss Goosey, go ahead, Miss Goose, go ahead. And Miss Goosey, rolling her eyes back towards Mr. Fox, said, just say it like this. For what we are about to receive. For what we are about to receive. And of course, that's as far as he got. Because as soon as he opened his mouth to give thanks for the food, Miss Goosey pulled her head out of his throat, jumped up into the sky, flapped her wings, honked and honked and honked and flapped away, and came down on top of the stable. Now, all the noise going on with this, and all the big wild honking and flapping and growling, brought out the farm wife. And the farm wife sees Mr. Fox, and it doesn't take her long to put two and two together and come up with dead fox. And she grabs her broom and she goes chasing across the farmyard, and she's swinging the broom and swinging at the fox, and Mr. Fox takes off like a shot around the barn and back up into the trees, and they never see him again. Mrs. Farm Wife stands there staring at the goose, who's now resting comfortably on top of the stables. She said, didn't I tell you, you silly goose? All I wanted to do was feed you. What would you like to do now? And without a word being spoken, Miss Goosey took the flight, gave one big honk, flew until she landed right on top of the goose pen. The farm wife walked over, opened the gate. Miss Goosey honked down from the top of the fence, and with one more happy honk, she waddled her way into the goose pen, and the farm wife closed the gate. From that day forward, on their farm, they never did see a fox again. The farm wife had a good story to tell that night around the dinner table, which she shared many times over again. Miss Goosey had a great adventure to share with all her goosey sisters, but she never tried to get away again. And the moral of the story, friends, like every good fairy tale, the farm wife and Miss Goose all lived happily ever after. I do thank you for visiting me today. I hope to see you again real soon. Until then, take good care of each other. Wassail.